All right, welcome everyone to today's HLAA webinar, Navigating Federal Employment for People with Disabilities. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Amanda Watson, and I'm the meeting planner for HLAA and your host today. As you know, today's presentation is being recorded, and it will be available for playback at a later date at HLAA's website, hearingloss.org. And let me start with a few tech tips. To see captions on this webinar, you will need to click on the CC icon. Click on Show Subtitle. Chat is available for technical issues and panelists only. We would like participants to please use the Q&A. We would like participants to please use the Q&A icon to ask questions. We will be using this to facilitate questions and answers after the presentation. If you've joined by computer, the presentation should be in side-by-side mode. Slides are on the left and panelists are on the right in gallery view. You can change the size of your side-by-side view by hovering between the two screens and moving the gray bar to adjust to the desired size. If you've joined by mobile device or phone, your view may be different and you may have to scroll between views to the desired one. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kelly Tremblay. Dr. Tremblay is an audiologist, HLAA board member, and a member of HLAA's Employment Task Force. Kelly, let me pass it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. And hi, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us today. And we've got a great lineup of speakers that will be introduced in a second. First, I just thought I'd give you a little bit of background about our Employment Task Force and why we're doing this and who we are. And, the Employment Task Force is based, around a purpose because of the problem. We know that Americans with hearing loss more actively search for work, but are less likely to be employed. And so our goal is to increase employment opportunities for Americans with hearing loss in the labor force by bringing people who are on the HR side, or bringing people from companies, or bringing people from government entities like today, to tell us a little bit more about how people with hearing loss can better access jobs, and how to create hearing-friendly spaces to remain employed and feel as if their hearing needs are met. So next slide, Amanda. So the idea is here that if we can break it down to various different goals to try to address as part of this task force. And hopefully you've been attending many of these webinars to see that we're trying to tackle many of these different questions. So if we can increase the employment rate, then people will be less likely to be employed. If we can help people understand what the job search is like to try and optimize your job search, then you'll be able to actively commit to more applications and know how to beat the algorithms, or to know how to address questions like disclosing your hearing loss, for example. We're hoping that people will be less likely to be left out of the labor force, and also earn equitable wages. We know that once employed, the annual wage of someone with a hearing loss or other disability can sometimes be lower. We want to promote lifelong learning, and so we want to address the employment gap by better understanding what gaps there may be in educational levels, so that you know how to best prepare your resume and how best to address those gaps and skills. So again, we know that the socioeconomic status may be that, affected by lower incomes. And so hopefully collectively, this group through these webinars will be able to arm ourselves with information that will help alleviate some of these challenges. If you have any ideas for webinars, please use the chat room and look. We're starting to schedule for next year, and we're always looking for ideas. So please, in the chat room, feel free to offer any ideas there that we haven't currently addressed. And also visit the website so you can see recordings from previous webinars. So who are we? Amanda, you can go to the next slide. I just want to thank our group here, our team. We are all representative from different sectors of society, and we have new people who are just joining, and that people who've rotated off. But for now, I want to recognize these names in front of you. We come from academia, we come from audiology, we come from advocacy groups, we come from industry. So it's wonderful to have people from companies on our board so that they can give us an idea of how the process of employment takes place, what happens behind the secret curtain, so to speak, and bring those resources forward. So thank you. Do you want to go to the next slide, Amanda? Okay, so then I will turn this over to Lisa now, who will introduce our speakers. And again, thank you for coming.
Thanks, Kelly. And I want to thank everyone who's tuned in today for what I think is going to be a very informative and interesting session on workplace strategies in the federal government and for people with disabilities. I'm a longtime HLAA member. I have a profound hearing loss, and I'm also a federal employee. So this topic today is personal to me. And that's why I'm so happy to introduce our two speakers. They both have so much expertise in this topic. They're so accomplished that I had to trim down their biographies for the sake of time. So if you want to read more about them, their bios are on the web page for this webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. The first speaker that you'll hear from is Dr. Scott Michael Robertson. He is a senior policy advisor in the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, otherwise known as ODEP. He is an adult with autism. He spearheads ODEP's $3.8 million partnership on inclusive apprenticeship and advances work to propel support for neurodiversity in workplaces and improve access to gainful employment and career paths for job seekers on the autism spectrum. Before joining ODEP, Dr. Robertson served as a Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Fellow in the U.S. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. He was the founding vice president of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, a national nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. And he earned his PhD in Information Sciences and Technology at Penn State. And he's won numerous awards, including for his work in fostering inclusive apprenticeships, for his leadership, and for empowering people with disabilities. And David Rice is our second speaker. He has been with the National Institutes of Health, or the NIH, since 2009. He's currently serving as the acting branch manager of special emphasis programs in NIH's Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. David has been deaf since the age of 4. He graduated with a degree in psychology with a focus on social stigmas of people with intellectual disabilities. And he's been very involved with the disability community since high school. He served as president of the organization Deaf in Government from 2014 to 2018. This organization empowers federal employees who are deaf or have hearing loss. He also led the Deaf NIH Employee Resource Group and was part of the Section 508 advisory group at NIH, whose mission is to make the internet a fully accessible environment. And his focus was on closed captions. And I've had the pleasure of working with David on the Disability Engagement Committee at NIH, so I can attest to his leadership skills and his knowledge and his compassion for disability issues. So with that, I'm going to, one thing I wanted to mention, feel free to ask questions to either of the speakers. You can put them in the Q&A chat like Amanda noted. They won't be answering the questions until after they both speak. So we're hoping to have at least 10 minutes or so at the end for a Q&A. So I'm gonna hand it over to Scott, who's gonna start us off.
Great, thanks, Lisa. I just wanna shift to share my PowerPoint slide. So hang on 1 second here. And let me get over here. Slideshow. There we go. Can you all see the slides okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for unmuting. Or saying it muted me for a second. As was mentioned, I am a senior policy advisor in the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor, and I am a white man with blue eyes, brown hair, glasses. I'm an autistic person. I am wearing a dark jacket and a light grayish kind of shirt. And my virtual background has the Department of Labor seal and the Office of Disability Employment Policies logo behind it. And the title of this presentation is Navigating Federal Employment for People with Disabilities, Resources and Supports. So I am going to flip to the next slide. And my pronouns are he, him, his, and himself. And my PhD is in Information Sciences and Technology. And as was emphasized, I've had a long-term engagement on empowering fellow folks with disabilities and have great solidarity for the challenges many other folks face, including right now during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the impact that has had on obtaining access and retaining and advancing careers in gainful employment and community living, and just other aspects of life opportunities and quality of life and health and wellness. And all of that, of course, interconnects from the wellness standpoint, especially back to employment as well, because employment is a social determinant of health, and health also affects folks' employment access. And my email address is robertson.scott.m@dol.gov. Feel free to contact me, connect with me after the webinar. Be happy to chat with anybody. And while I do not have hearing loss myself, I do regularly make use of closed captioning and other technology. I have some auditory processing challenges that accompany my autism. This is very common for autistic people and many other folks with cognitive disabilities, where it impacts that auditory processing and other aspects of sort of the sensory system. So it's one of the reasons I emphasize with folks that captioning, for instance, and other technologies can help benefit everybody from that communication access, which is so empowering to have equal access for communication, whether it's taking it in or, for instance, expressive communication with augmented and alternative communication devices. And my picture also is on the slide. I like to have this just in case in the slides, just in case, say, if the video isn't working on a presentation. And I want to share right now the mission of the Office of Disability Employment Policy. So we are a small non-regulatory agency in the Department of Labor. We call ourselves sort of small but mighty, if you will. We have about 50 or so staff members, but magnify our impact through technical assistance, collaboration, outreach, cross-connection on policy engagement, and, for instance, running technical assistance centers and projects and running outreach campaigns to emphasize access to employment for people with disabilities and different facets of that. For instance, this month is National Mental Health Month. So, for instance, we're running the Mental Health at Work, What Can I Do campaign. And there's a picture of that at the bottom of this slide at ODEP's website, where you can learn more about that campaign. And if you go to that website at dol.gov/agency/ODEP, you can find that campaign. And also learn more about our mission, which is about developing and influencing policies and practices that increase the number and quality of employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And we envision an unlimited number of employment opportunities for all people with disabilities to have work that aligns with our interests, talents, strengths, and skill sets, and jobs that folks can feel passionate about pursuing in their life, just like folks without disabilities can enjoy their work, and how it fits, again, with their interests, talents, and skill sets. And our policies and practices around diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility help drive this work. So there's a picture to the right-hand side of DEIA, sort of multicolored swirls, I guess you would characterize that maybe as, and picture of different types of disabilities, mobility, cognitive, sensory in terms of deaf and hearing loss and hard of hearing, and folks who have used a cane, for instance, either for mobility, or folks, for instance, who are blind or have low vision, and other different types of disabilities across the full range of diversity of disability. And is there intersectionality with, say, race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, et cetera? And so that's why executive orders and there's other executive policy power this work, for instance, executive order on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the federal workforce. And then one as well on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government, which obviously is very relevant for what we're talking about today with advancing better access to federal employment opportunities. And then as well as executive orders, for instance, on empowering Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, Black Americans, Latinx Americans, and Indigenous Americans. And it is also, this month is National Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander month. So I just wanted to mention that as well. And we run technical assistance projects that help drive support for folks. Thank you for someone pointed out in the chat, the Job Accommodation Network at askjan.org. Yes, we do fund that to provide free expert technical assistance for job seekers and workers with disabilities, employers, family members, anybody else who is passionate about supporting better access to employment and learning more about accommodations and supports and brainstorming, for instance, ideas for accommodation supports that can help folks be successful in the job, in performing their jobs itself. And also, in addition to the performance and productivity in folks' jobs, the ability to attain jobs that fit your interests, skills, and talents through that job search process, being able to seek accommodations for applying to jobs as well. A few other examples are our partnership on inclusive apprenticeship. I'm the federal project manager for that, as was mentioned. So inclusiveapprenticeship.org for improving access to career pathways for apprenticeships in areas like information technology, cybersecurity, healthcare, financial services, clean and renewable energy. The partnership on employment accessible technology, peteworks.org, is advancing equal access to accessible and emerging technology. We're talking about, say, artificial intelligence, virtual and augmented reality, Internet of Things, et cetera, and examining and addressing barriers that come up where emerging technology might create access barriers for folks. And we need solutions for that to help ensure that technology does not unduly hinder folks from attaining gainful employment, competitive integrated employment, and also ensures that folks can be successful and have equal opportunities to thrive in the workplace when they're performing their jobs. And for instance, the Employer Assistance and Resource Network on Disability Inclusion, EARN, askEARN.org, is also another TA center that we have that helps out employers, whether they're in the federal government, state and local governments, and in industry, on how they can be recruiting, hiring, retaining, and advancing people with disabilities and supporting equal access and providing supports, accommodations, for instance, full access to mentoring, a range of different options to help empower folks to be successful, especially since we, as folks with disabilities, are the largest largest minority population in the United States and other countries. I believe folks with disabilities are a market close to the size of China worldwide. And that was also important as far as when employers are thinking about untapped talents in the workplace, including, for instance, here in the federal government, where we have 3 million workers in the federal government and are always hiring for jobs and diversity of different, whether it's human resources, communications, technical jobs like we have in policy or information technology, medical, scientists, you name it, design, even doctors, for instance, and teachers on the reservations, for instance, military bases. I mean, the range of different types of employment across the federal government that I'll be mentioning today. And the logos for all these technical assistance projects and centers are to the right on this slide. And so agencies in the federal government have to support federal opportunities in federal government for workers with disabilities and protect against discrimination, but go even further than that to support affirmative action goals to hire, recruit, retain, and advance federal employees with disabilities under Section 501 of the Rehabilitation Act, which the Rehab Act governs a lot of what we do in the federal government, and it's very much parallel to what you would see, for instance, with the Americans with Disabilities Act in industry and state and local government. And it requires a utilization goal of 12% for hiring employees with disabilities among federal agencies, and a 2% goal for employees with more targeted disabilities, for instance, autism, blind and low vision, deaf, and other aspects in terms of hearing loss, and other aspects of disability that may affect sort of sensory more broadly in terms of sensory processing, other developmental disabilities in addition to autism, like intellectual disability, and for instance, significant physical disabilities. And there's a picture at the bottom for the self-identification of disability, where you may not be able to see the text on there. It's kind of small, but it has some of those disabilities listed on the left-hand side. And that's where folks would identify with what disability. For instance, myself with autism on the first item there on the left-hand side toward the top. And we have key programs that drive entry to federal jobs. For instance, Schedule A, hiring authority for people with disabilities. It is a hiring authority that allows agencies to hire folks non-competitively, and then they can be converted over to competitive service in the federal government. I came in for Schedule A myself. It allows for an easier opportunity to attain a job that aligns with your skill sets and have your interviews, for instance, often directly with the hiring manager, and reduce some of these historical barriers to employment that have come up sometimes for going through the regular HR process. It is not required for folks with disabilities to use. They can also go the general way too, but it is one option out there that can be very helpful. And agencies often find it a win-win, not only for hiring talented people with disabilities, but also with the fact that sometimes they can reduce the complexity and the time frame for the hiring process. It doesn't always work this fast, but in my case, I was interviewed in July of 2015, and I started toward late August, actually. So it was less than 2 months from when I did my interview and then I started in the workplace. Not always quite that quickly, but it can be often a lot faster than sometimes it's 5, 6, 7 months or whatever for standard employment. Just you would think of like in industry where you do the interview and there's maybe a long process before you actually start at work. We have the Workforce Recruitment Program, WRP.gov, for college students with disabilities and recent graduates. That's a program run by us at ODEP, the Office of Disability and Employment Policy, and the Department of Defense in collaboration to support that entryway pathway for college students with disabilities and recent graduates, as well as similar programs under the Pathways Program for students and recent graduates across the federal government, including improving access to internships to attain employment. And now you're also increasingly seeing, in addition to internship programs, that in some cases are done separately from Pathways, you have these apprenticeships and sometimes targeted disability-focused hiring programs, which are legal under the Rehab Act, just as much as they're legal under the ADA in the private sector, because there's affirmative action purpose. And some of these are specific to different types of disabilities, for instance, neurodiversity. Maybe in the future, you might see it more, for instance, on sensory disabilities. And there's a picture of the screenshot of WRP.gov at the bottom, Workforce Recruitment Program. I'm going to flip to the next slide and talk a little bit more about the Job Accommodation Network, which again provides resources on work accommodations at askjan.org, and also makes available technical assistance specialists to provide free, confidential, and expert assistance on accommodations for work and the job search process. The experts have specialized knowledge in different types of disabilities. So that could be sensory, as far as visual, hearing, smell, taste, touch, etc. Cognitive thinking and learning, physical and mobility, mental health, etc. And we also recognize that some folks may have different types of disabilities that overlap. And one thing that can be helpful with Jan is you can connect with them, and again, free resource, completely confidential, experts there to assist you, and just brainstorm different options for accommodations. Maybe you have some ideas, but you're uncertain, or you just don't know where to begin, but you know where the challenges lie. Those specialists can actually help with that and give you different ideas. And that helped on my end. When I started in the federal government, I was experiencing some challenges with executive functioning, workplace communication, for instance, that comes alongside my autism. And so I connected with Jan, with my supervisor at the time. You don't have to do it with your supervisor, but I did. And we brainstormed and came up with ideas, and that resulted in me eventually receiving executive coaching, where I had phone calls with an expert who helped me develop some strategies to handle niche challenges as they came up. And that helped a lot for my initial adjustment. And now I'll be reaching 7 years now in the federal government in August in ODEP. So it's really empowered my success in my job and my performance and productivity. And then I've had other things like assistive technology, different aids and things like that, noise canceling headphones when we were in person. Right now we're working remotely, and different options that help me with accommodations to thrive in my work. I often talk about accommodations. They're typically have no cost, but when they do have a cost, the average cost is about $500, Jan has found. And it's very helpful for enhancing performance and productivity. So I encourage folks with disabilities, including folks, for instance, who may have hearing loss or are deaf, who are listening to this, or watching this webinar, or, listening in the sense of viewing the captioning, to take advantage of supports and accommodations to be successful. And there's a screenshot for askjan.org at the bottom of this slide. And some other examples of supports that can help folks with thriving and being successful in their work include mentoring programs and navigators for different systems. How do you navigate when you're initially onboarding? How do you navigate, for instance, traveling for work? Different aspects, again, the workplace culture and communication, the accommodation process itself. Maybe you need some navigation assistance on how to handle that. We often recommend that you have accommodations and supports at agencies through centralized accommodation funds. We have that here at Department of Labor, and that's very common for agencies, so that accommodations are not happening at an agency because of competing for the budget with, say, a project. It's at the central level, often at departments or agencies. So it's made available for all folks, and it's based on need, not on the fact of, the manager of this project can't do the accommodation because it's not in their budget for that specific project. So that's a newer practice we've had in modern times to make sure folks can support full access accommodations and supports to be successful in their jobs. And affinity groups and employee resource groups. In my bio, I forgot to mention that I'm president of our affinity group for people with disabilities at the Department of Labor, the Disability Action Group, DAG, and many other departments, agencies have that. Folks can join with disabilities, people with disabilities, workers with disabilities in the federal government can join and connect with others who have disabilities and are allies. And those groups can also engage on supporting better practices and policies to support success. And then I also wanted to mention the importance, again, of technology. It's very, very common for folks to access cart captioning and automated captioning, sign language interpreters, and other forms of workplace assistive technology, such as noise canceling headphones, different things that may help with stress management, maybe different software to help with planning, organization. Technology is something that is widely used here in the federal government to support full success in jobs and opportunities. And I have a picture at the bottom, again, of noise canceling headphones. And for instance, on the left-hand side next to that is a picture of it when folks are engaged in a virtual meeting like this, thinking of that virtual space, just like the physical space. What do you need to have equal access to perform your job successfully? So I know that was a lot of info for folks to navigate that I shared. I just want to make sure folks had different exposure to what we have available here in the federal government for different opportunities to support success, including through accommodations and supports. And after David's presentation, we'll be doing Q&A with what you all may, for instance, have in the chat room.
Thank you, Scott. That was so much good information. I wanted to just mention quickly that our last webinar through this employment task force was on Jan. We had a consultant from the Job Accommodation Network. So if anyone's interested, I think that's archived on the HLAA website. So I guess we'll switch to David now. Scott, did you want to stop sharing your screen?
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. Sometimes I forget to remind on that. This just had a picture of people, and this last slide with people with question marks next to them for the questions that we'll be having later on. Let me hit stop share on here. Here we go. There we go. It's off. Thanks. And now you can flip it over for David.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the resources that you've provided because not a lot of people really know that all that information is out there, but it's good to have it at one little stop shop in today's training. So I appreciate that. My little presentation and talk is going to be more about my personal journey and the journey of getting a federal career as someone who is deaf or has a hearing loss. It's been I have been in Scott mentioned about WRP, the Workforce Recruitment Program. That's actually how I came over to NIH, I believe 12 years ago. I went to Catholic University of America down here in DC, and the Disability Services Office sent out an email saying if anyone would like to, get a federal job, come in and get a pre-screening interview. I went and had an interview and got in the database for say, and then I graduated, and the minute I graduated I got about 3 or 4 different phone calls for interviews, and I chose NIH. So it's kind of sometimes I feel like that I was a little fortunate to be able to choose my first job. Not a lot of people get that opportunity, and I just wanted to bring this up because that's how impactful WRP program was for me as someone who was in a college career. I mean, who was graduating from college. But I want to back up a little bit into when I was in high school is really what got me into this field. My title is I'm a special emphasis I'm the special emphasis program manager for all the portfolios. Scott mentioned about the executive order 14035 about the DEIA. So I kind of oversee all the different communities, underserved representation, including people with disabilities. And it was that time when I grew up in a high school. It was a very rural town. I knew that there was a one mindset. I was the only person that was deaf or had any sort of hearing loss in the entire community. And so through sports, I was able to fit in. And that I'm very thankful for being able to do that. But I noticed that some of the other students who had other disabilities, not just hearing loss, within our school system were for lack of a better term, were being bullied, and they were being considered outcasts. And at that particular moment of time, I was like, at 16, 15 years old, I knew that wasn't right, and it kind of it kind of started my journey into advocacy, and especially for people with disability, which now have kind of expanded into all the underserved communities that experience discrimination, experience structural injustice and structural racism. I tell a lot of people that they don't really consider individuals with disability that they a civil rights issue, but it really is a civil rights issue. I mean, getting access. That's why we have programs like JAN that can help individuals with disabilities coming into the federal government that don't really know how to navigate the federal government on how to get reasonable accommodation, how to get closed captioning. I've been a strong advocate for the requirement of closed captioning on all of NIH's and federal government wide programs that they put on. So it really started back when I was much younger in high school. Then I went to Catholic University, and I started seeing it again. I started seeing this sort of group of kids like get considered to be an outcast, and a lot of people just didn't want to be a part of them. And I wanted to change that. And so one way I changed that is I started so in dorm rooms we have levels, and in each level at this particular campus had themes. So there was one theme that was for LGBTQ plus. There was one that was a theme for Asian American Pacific Islanders. I wanted to get one in the theme for individuals with disabilities, so we can bring in able bodies, we can bring in individuals with disabilities, and we can all have a level set space to be able to talk about issues, to be able to advocate for our community. And so when that came, when I go, that's why I have a degree in psychology and intellectual disability, because I'm very passionate about that area. When I graduated though, and then at Catholic University, I, to be honest with you, I didn't know what career I should go, or what career path I should do, and all that kind of. It was very hard for me. And WRP really helped me narrow that vision down. I saw when I'm at NIH, National Institutes of Health now. I saw the standard that NIH had and ensuring deaf and hard of hearing like myself had access. We have a centralized interpreting and cart service. So it does not come out of the budget of your supervisor. It's centralized. Everyone pays into it. If you need the service, you can request for it and you get the service. That has been one of the biggest reasons why I chose NIH, because of that. I know that I saw someone that was on the call here today. Mr. Gary Morton was who was at NIH, and he was a very integrated part of making that happen at NIH before I even arrived there. So I wanted to shout out to Gary. So thank you very much for doing that, because it made my career decision very easy. I wanted to, when I got into NIH, so there was a lot of other concerns that we had in terms of accessibility, 508 accessibility, PDFs, PowerPoint slides, accessibility into the website. There's still challenges, but with this new executive order that came out from the Biden administration, we are seeing a totally 180 degrees flip, where we are going in the right direction to make this a reality for people, not for people with disability, but just everyone. Because as Scott mentioned earlier, you said that, we're one of the largest minority groups in the United States, and it's only getting larger. If we were in person, I usually say, hey, I usually tell people to look around and realize that, eventually one day, whether it's you or someone like you or someone next to you, 1 out of 4 of you will have some sort of disability. So you're preparing yourself for the future to be able to have accessibility for everyone. When I will say this, now being a hiring manager, I have a unique look at how hiring managers get employees, and I see when people apply through Schedule A, I often get a package, and I get a package of Schedule A candidates, and I look through those candidates first because they're not competitive, meaning that if any of them meet my what I'm looking for and the position qualified, I can just pick them up, call them up, have an interview. If I like the individual, and then I talk to my bosses, and we bring them on board. Schedule A is a very, very unique tool for individuals with disability, and really, it's about getting us in the door. It's not about jumping the line like some people would like to say, or getting an advantage. But I will say, if you look across the board, and it was mentioned earlier today, individuals with disabilities struggle to find jobs. They struggle to get jobs. And then when they do get jobs, they struggle to move up the ladder and get jobs. I'm in a position right now to educate and to be able to tell other hiring managers, utilizing Schedule A is a really critical tool in diversifying your talent and diversifying your ideas, because individuals that that come from all walks of life and abilities bring unique ideas into the workforce, especially at NIH, where we are the forefront of biomedical research in the world. And we need those diverse ideas. Without those diverse ideas, we can't keep advancing. And I find that a very important as a hiring manager is to diversify my talents and to look into Schedule A and look at the candidates that come forward. Since this is kind of like how to get into the federal government type of presentation, one little tip that I will give individuals regarding resume. When you're looking for a position, you're looking at a job through USA Job, and then I know that USA Jobs can be a little overwhelming and cumbersome. But you really want to try to tie your resume into what the job is asking for. I can't tell you how many times I get resumes that come into me. They're just a standard job resume. And when you get into the federal government, a lot of time, specifically on specific jobs, they're looking for specific skill sets and they're looking for specific talents. And so if you feel like that's going to be a great job for you and you are more than well qualified, I highly recommend to bring what you've done in the past, your education, whether it's a nonprofit or you worked at your other job before, but put that in the front of the resume to tie directly into what the job is. Speaking about nonprofits, I promised Lisa that I would mention also a little bit about the deaf in government, what we do. I was the president for several years. I think it was 4 years. I can't remember. But I was also the vice president for the 4 years prior to that. So I've been part of this organization a lot. It really, and they were a nonprofit organization. It was really a way for me to develop my career, and I had control of it. And so, but in getting the leadership skills that they provided me, and listening to the mentorship that they have and then providing me, they really helped me develop into what is needed to be successful into a successful career. The deaf in government mission is to empower deaf and hard of hearing government employees at the local, state, and federal level. We address communication barriers, accessibility issues, and promote full inclusion of a work environment through networking, fostering professional growth, and career advancement. So I recommend if people want to be get involved with the deaf in government, you can certainly do so. They have a website. It's called deafingov.org. That's something that I'm very proud to be a part of for all those years, and it really helped shape my career as I am where I am today. In closing of this, before we get into the questions, I want to challenge some people when they trickle in some of the questions. I would really like to know what are some of the barriers that you're facing, because I've been in the federal government in 13 years now, and I realized I was very fortunate when I got out of college. I was able to immediately get a job within the federal government. So I'm sort of I understand my own blind spots, and I enjoy listening to people try to make it better for the future generation or the current generation to be able to come on board and join the federal government. So when you're developing these questions, I would love to see some of these questions asked about, like I'm having a hard time even getting to the interview stage. What can I do? Something like that. And I'll be happy to respond in the best way I can and be able to help you, give you some pointers as well, because ultimately my goal of being here today is there's all these participants watching live and that come on later to be able to seek a job in the federal government, and so that they can feel they're contributing to the society, because that's what we all want to do. So with that being said, Lisa, can you go ahead and we can start the Q&A session? I'd be happy to work with Scott on answering them.
Sure. Thank you for that that great speech, and I learned some stuff about you I didn't know, so thank you for sharing. We have some questions. I'm trying to go back. Well, I just want to, there's a couple comments just to acknowledge. Someone mentioned to mention DOD's CAP in addition to the Job Accommodation Network. I think you can check that out online. It's cap.mil, I believe. There's another just a comment that says that Schedule A is a possible foot in the door opportunity for potential employees. However, it is a hiring authority, recruitment, but not very helpful for existing federal employees, retention and promotion, basically, because the hiring official can choose not to interview, select the employee, and a permanent employee, like a new employee, has to go through a probationary period, typically lasting 1 year. That was just a comment. I don't know if either of you want to comment on that comment.
Sure, I could comment. I think, Lisa, I concur that Schedule A was more originally envisioned on entryway. It's been around for so long that folks didn't really think of that space on career advancement. We have had discussions and engagement on how to be enhancing policies and practices to help folks with their career advancement in the federal government, because we do recognize folks change jobs. But it takes time sometimes to change the policies and practices in this space. The federal government, sometimes it's like turning an aircraft carrier at times because it is so large. But it is something we are definitely working on. And I concur completely. We talk about career pathways all the time. And it's something that I personally have had experienced it myself too, because I just had my promotion to senior policy advisor a couple of years ago. So I applied for my promotion internally without using Schedule A the second time, although often we use Schedule A, if I remember right, if you stay in the same job series and in the same agency. But if you want to change job series or you want to change agencies, sometimes that's where you might have to go for another probationary period, and it's an issue. And it is barriers that it's at the forefront that we're looking at that, including our employer policy team at ODEP and my collaboration with them and others to examine that issue. But thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. So there is a question. I think a lot of us have run into this. One concern I have repeatedly is employers substituting auto captioning instead of responding to my request for a live captioner. Suggestions on how to make the case that they must provide an effective accommodations. Right now, I'm a private sector contract attorney, and what's happening is that I made my case for a live captioner based on missing/inaccurate information, but now I'm not being assigned to higher paying workflows because this would require accessible training issues.
Yeah, this is a challenge. And actually, Lisa on my engagement committee, she actually drafted a white paper about this very notion of the substituting auto captioning instead of the live captioning. My stance has always been on the FCC standards for captioning is 95 or 96% accuracy. We know based off of research that auto captioning is nowhere near that. It's getting better. It's like around 85% right now, but we know that for full access and effective access, that we need that to be as close to 100% as possible. One way that we handle that in house here at NIH. But another strategy you can always go to is reaching out to like the FCC and asking them to provide a standard practice. I actually think they actually have it on the website on what their captioning standard of practice is, and you can always lean on that because there's research and even some like companies like Otter that does auto transcription, they fully admit that they're only around 85%. And if the standard in FCC is 96%, right there, your justification of effective communication is needed. So that's what I'll say on that. I didn't know, Scott, I think I covered that well. Did you get anything about that in your office?
Yeah, as far as, for instance, on the captioning, you covered that extremely well. And
Yeah.
I love that you brought up FCC in terms of the emphasis on there. And I don't know, I guess it sort of varies by opinion on this, but my perspective is I'd rather have auto captioning in some circumstances than no captioning access. Like it's better, but I think especially if folks value having that cart captioning, they should be able to have that. That is definitely a reasonable combination as an alternative to the auto. Now, there may be some circumstances, I know in my case, that the auto captioning in Teams is great because I don't want to necessarily have to request captioning on all my meetings. So sometimes the auto can be helpful for just with meetings, but for some other folks, they may need the cart captioning. And if they need that for equal access, then they should be able to receive that as a full combination. So I concur with all your reasoning. We're on definitely on the same page. On all that.
Yeah. And the key word here is, when you're talking about effective combination, that is individualized. That is an effective combination for you as an individual. So your needs are going to be very different. Even though you have a hearing loss, your needs from the person next to you are going to be very different than the person on the other side of you. So thank you. Yep.
Thank you both. Someone just asked if the contact information, I think, Scott, you already put that in the chat, if that would be available for both of you. And David, if you're a part of HR.
Oh, I am not part of HR. I'm actually in the Equal Opportunities Office. It's actually, we brand ourselves Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, EDI, but there's one side of the house that does all the EEO complaints and formal complaints. But on our side of the house, we focus on DEIA, diversity and inclusion, and we now added the A, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So I'm very proud to be on that part. I think there's a lot of work to movement to be there, but I work closely with the OHR because we have the same mission, we have the same goals, and bringing in people with disabilities and also bringing in diversifying the talent work. So we work hand in hand. So sometimes you can get confused with me being in HR because I talk a lot about recruitment. It's because I'm trying to get people here at NIH as much as possible.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also, Lisa, that to say it out loud, my email address, just in case folks had any issues with accessing the chat, it's Robertson, my last name, so ROBERTSON.Scott, SCOTT.M as in Michael at DOL.gov. In case folks need that. And it looks like, and David's email address is now in the
mine is david.rice@nih.gov.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question about USA Jobs, and that one of the issues that it chops up the resume you submit, and the parsing is not friendly to non-traditional job seekers, for instance, people with disabilities with employment gaps. How do you get your full resume before the hiring manager?
So I could answer that. And then David, if you want to jump into, is that you don't have to use the resume builder on usajobs.gov. You can actually submit your own document. It's good to make sure you have the things that they want at times, as far as they may want depending on what they have on the posting and what they're requesting as far as on the documents, as far as your salary, your past salaries and your past hiring manager. Sometimes there are things that we sometimes have in the federal government that folks want to see on the resume, as well as on a federal resume. They're often longer too. Like they have a lot more of like skills, talents, achievements, and things like that, more drawn out than the private sector. And sometimes they're very many pages because folks scan for certain keywords that fit position openings. But you can customize your own resume with doing that. Like I have my own that I create. I don't use the resume builder tool there on usajobs.gov. You can use that tool, but it's not required. And if that tool is creating issues for creating your resume, then you may find it easier to create your own resume in Microsoft Word, still containing, again, the same types of information that you'd want on there, the same fields in terms of what you've done for your past employment, your skill sets, your volunteering, and things like that. And then submit that as a PDF. It may take Word docs too, but I know it definitely, for instance, takes accessible PDFs to upload. So I don't know if that helps if they're having challenges with the resume builder tool to just do it manually.
And then additionally to that, you can always reach out to the OHR specialist that's on the job description, and you can send that to them. One of the other things that since we're kind of on USA Jobs, I always sometimes each agency has a selective placement coordinator, and those selective placement coordinators are under OHR, and their job is essentially to look at all the Schedule A candidates and to find if there's any current vacancies that they could put forward a Schedule A candidate that maybe applied at a different job. And so that's their job. And I'm pretty certain, and Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, pretty certain that the selective placement coordinator listing is on OPM's website. I'm pretty certain of that.
Yes, you're correct. I'll see if I can find the URL for folks. There is a directory where you can pull it up by agencies. Now, your experience may vary in terms of whether OPM
Yes.
is updating that. We don't have
Yeah.
control over that. For instance, DOL, because the Office of Personnel Management controls that. But crossing fingers that I believe in most cases they tend to keep that up to date. But I'll see if I can drop the website address for that selective placement coordinator directory at opm.gov in the chat for you all.
Great. We have a lot of more questions. I'm seeing it's already 5 to 4. So I wanted to get to this one question because I think a couple people have asked about, do I mention my disability right off the bat, or when should applicants disclose their hearing loss?
I'll answer that. That is a very difficult question, and that in our community, the hearing loss community, that is the elephant in the room. At me as a hiring manager and me as an NIH, we want to know that so that we can provide you the best possible accessibility technologies for when you come on board at the interviews. I don't ask that. What I do on my end is I ask the candidate right out of the gate, like, we were really impressed with your resume. We would like you to come in for an interview at this time with these people. If you have any reasonable accommodation requests, please contact me and we'll fulfill those requests. I do that for everyone, regardless of anything. And that right there makes it more welcoming for people to realize that they care about this. And so if you don't get that, from an employer, the best way to go about it is just to simply just say, I have a reasonable accommodation request where I would need a sign language interpreter, or I would need cart services, captioning. That's not disclosing your disability and where it's going to stay in a file tucked away for the rest of your career. And in fact, it's not kept. The only time it's really kept is what Scott showed on the SF-256 form, where you fill out the self-identification form. And that's the only time it's ever kept in files. And that file is never kept on your personnel file. It is kept, and so to help the agency understand the dynamics of what we have at the federal government. So, like, for example, what it helps me with when you disclose it, it helps me recognize that there are a lot of individuals here in NIH that have hearing loss. We need to get more resources for captioning. We need to get more resources for interpreting services. And in fact, that has been one of the biggest driving forces on us enabling NIH to get a interpreting contract that is the second largest interpreting contract of the entire federal government. And an interpreting contract also includes cart services and captioning services. So disclosing it is obviously a very personal decision for people, but I view it as a benefit so we can get to understand what the agency can do.
I just wanted to share that I put in the chat also resources from Jan and Erin on disclosure, self-identification of disability. I concur that it's a personal thing in terms of folks go about that, and they may only want to do it selectively with just some folks to keep it confidentially as far as their accommodations and not share with other coworkers, because there are some folks that share their disabilities more publicly with myself, but I think the vast majority of a lot of folks are a lot more selective because of fears of, for good reason, of discrimination, et cetera, that some folks have experienced, previously. And so this disclosure guide should be, helpful, y'all. And I also agree with David in terms of that folks should be able to access all the accommodation supports they need. I'm one of the persons that goes bold on accommodations and supports because I think that they're helpful for enhancing productivity and performance. And I emphasize that it should be the onus that we're hoping to move to long-term is the defaults should be folks receive the accommodation supports that they need, and folks should have to justify why that person is not receiving the accommodation supports. They better have a good reason, especially for something that is, aligned with empowering that person to be successful in their job. That is where the direction we have to be with accommodations and supports, because they, provide such great benefit for success, including captioning.
Well, it's 4:00. So I wish we had more time because this is such a great conversation. I want to thank both of you so much for this time. I learned a lot. And I'm wondering if we can maybe email you some of these questions that went unanswered.
Absolutely.
Sure. Are you able to, you're able to save all the questions off?
I'm going to ask Amanda to answer that, and I'll hand it back over to Amanda to close things up. But thank you both. And thanks to our captionist as well.
Yes, we can send you the questions and get your answers to post when we post the webinar recording. So that'd be great if you have the time to do that. But thank you so much for a great webinar. Thank you so much, Lisa and Kelly, for all your hard work on the Employment Task Force. And thank you so much, David and Scott, for coming out today. It was an amazing discussion, and a big thanks also to our captioner, Joe Gale. So thank you all for joining us today. Like I said, visit hearingloss.org, where you can find recordings for this webinar and past webinars that HLAA has. And we hope you have a good rest of your day. See you later. Bye.
Thank you all. Thanks for joining and being interactive with lots of questions that we couldn't cover everything, but we'll try to cover the rest later on. I appreciate the opportunity to present today on this webinar, and I hope everybody's safe and well as well with the pandemic.
Likewise. Thank you. Nice seeing you all.
Yeah, it was great co-presenting with you, David. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely, I agree. And I also would love to connect, talk together, and share ideas and everything, because I think we're in line pretty well.
Definitely concur with that. Let's stay in touch. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.